Hi there, everybody. Today we've been asked to do a little bit of sort of summarizing our ideas on the legacy of Thomas Jefferson. This has kind of been one of those hotly contested issues in American history because of how influential he was, sort of just in the founding of our country, but also certain social issues that certain things may have been acceptable at one point in our history and obviously are not now, that sort of pertain directly to Thomas Jefferson, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Obviously, three of the big things, the biggies, if you will, were written on Thomas Jefferson's gravestone at Monticello. He was the author of our Declaration of Independence, and then he also was the father of the University of Virginia, and he also on his gravestone wanted his work for religious freedom in the state of Virginia to be noted. Now, I think all those should be taken into account, mostly because this is what Thomas wanted on his gravestone. We're still looking at this literally hundreds of years later, and people will be looking at it for hundreds of years to come. This was sort of, what did Thomas Jefferson want to be known for? And obviously people want to be known for the positive aspects of their careers and their lives, but I think it's very telling that these were the three individual sort of achievements that he wanted to have sort of engraved, not only in his tombstone but in history itself. I think that's sort of a telling sort of summary. It gives us a lot of different themes about how he felt with regards to liberties, freedom, education, obviously, those sort of, and really his work on all of those fronts has been beneficial to all of us as Americans. The University of Virginia is a fine university. Religious freedom is available really to all Americans, and the Declaration of Independence, that goes without saying. So, but there's also the issue of Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner. He actually owned quite a large population of slaves on his homestead, and obviously that's completely and totally unacceptable by today's social standards, as it should be. It's the institution of slavery was barbaric, and it really took for granted, in my mind, the individuality of man, whether that man be white, black, or any other ethnicity or race. That should be preserved. But I think, I'm not saying we should give the Founding Fathers or Thomas Jefferson himself a pass necessarily, but some things were accepted at this point in history, the founding of our country, which aren't accepted in the present day. So that sort of gives you a little bit of an idea on why. I mean, obviously, if we were to say somebody owns slaves now, public outcry, and rightly so, would be incredibly negative, and that person would probably have to go into exile somewhere. I mean, realistically, as they should, but at this point, it was fairly commonplace, especially in the South, for wealthy landowners to own however many slaves. I mean, anywhere from one to hundreds. So I think in this regard, we can attest a little bit of that to culture, but it should also be noted that Thomas, although he quite clearly thought of his slaves as inferior to him because he thought of himself as able to own slaves, and this wasn't just a non-intellectual, I say. I mean, he was obviously quite smart and had great ideas when it comes to liberty. I think the fact that it's been published and written and sort of documented very well that Jefferson was very, very kind, very friendly to his slaves, as were many of the founding fathers, relative to the day. I mean, obviously, you still own slaves at that point, but I think it's notable that he was more benevolent towards his slaves than most slave owners of the day. I mean, obviously, once again, that doesn't necessarily give him a pass, but if in this day and age, it's totally unacceptable, but in that day and age, it was considered to be normal. Owning slaves was normal at that period of time. Maybe not normal for everyone, but normal for wealthy landowners in the South. But establishing religious freedom for the state of Virginia, establishing the University of Virginia, and writing our Declaration of Independence were not normal behavior. They were certainly not ordinary. They were extraordinary. So if I were to leave with sort of a closing thought, I believe we should remember Thomas Jefferson's legacy as the items of his life which were extraordinary and which were not ordinary, if that makes any sense. All right, thank you, everybody.